Hi everybody, it's Nikki again, and I think this is going to be my last video for tonight. I think I am going to make one more tomorrow about another auto mode kind of disaster scenario. But this one is my personal experience, not to be used as medical advice because it really is not medical advice. We will all have different experiences on this pump. I'm sharing some of my most negative ones because they did a number on my psyche, and I am damaged goods right now, and I'm not touching auto. So I'm sharing some of the stuff that auto has done in my case, which is causing me to really stay away from auto. Okay, in this particular case, and I'm just pointing out, again, these are my numbers because I'm trying to track my calibration factor. I do not ever test like this, but right now I have a reason, and I'm trying to understand what these factors mean. So I'm testing a lot, and what's happening because I'm testing a lot is I'm seeing a whole lot of stuff that my pump is doing, and it's some amazing stuff, and it's some amazing scary stuff. And right now I feel safest in manual, you know, testing 8,000 times a day. But you know, anyway, so on this particular morning, and I'm going to start with around, I had gone into auto mode this particular morning at 9:25 a.m. Okay, so the reason I'm telling you this is because on that particular day at 1:30 in the afternoon, I began to rise. On this rise, when I went up and up and up, and for the life of me, I could not get myself to come back down. I was in manual, I was pushing insulin, and I was freaked out. This happened 2 days in a row. I actually changed an infusion set because I was like, I cannot be getting my insulin. Then I went back and began to calculate what I'd actually gotten in insulin through auto over this period of time. And I realized I wasn't getting insulin, but it wasn't because my infusion set was loose. It was because auto mode was withholding insulin, which is a great thing sometimes, but when it's not, it really is not. So in this particular morning, okay, I'm going to start with, I entered at 9:25. At 10:34 a.m., this was something just very, very interesting. My blood sugar was a 178. I need insulin at 178. My calibration factor dropped below stable, so my concentration dropped a little bit, down to a 5.2, and that seemed to trigger in auto to withhold a microbolus. So you think, okay, what's a microbolus? A 0.1 unit of insulin or whatever, but I realized that if auto mode is looking at my calibration factor, and every time it drops, it's stopping, a little bit of insulin, then that means I'm at a temp basal. Like, that's what it equals. This is a temp basal. And I'll tell you what I've learned over these couple of hours. My blood sugar was a 178. I did not get that microbolus. And I think that's why I float in auto mode, because I need my insulin at 178. So this went on. I was 40 minutes in auto mode, and at 11:03, I did begin, at some point I went down because I was also doing insulin and running around and doing whatever. But this is where it kind of got interesting. I rebounded, and by 12 o'clock, say, my blood sugar was on the rise again. By 1 o'clock, it was really starting to move. By 1:30, I was pushing up past 200, which is a high number for me now. It hasn't always been, but now it really is. That's a big number. So I tried to go back to see where did this start, right? And I got out of auto mode, and it didn't fix it. That's why I thought something was wrong. So here's what I figured out. There was 40 minutes of minimum delivery. At 11:30, from 11:30 to about 12:30, I added up my microboluses. So this is the way auto mode works. I'm not a technician. I'm not a representative. Please, Medtronic, don't send somebody after me. I'm trying to understand what this is doing, and I think it's doing it to a lot of people. What auto mode is doing, I believe, is it's taking my calibration factor and it's administering insulin or withholding insulin based on my interstitial fluid fluctuations. But there's this delay. Okay, so it's just not that great. So in this case, over 1 hour, I added up my microboluses. I got 1.05 units of insulin, where in that time in manual mode with a regular basal rate, I would have gotten 1.25. So it's 0.2 units. You think that's not that big of a deal. But my blood sugar was already on the rise at that point, and I didn't need less insulin. I just didn't need a temp basal at that rate, at that time. From 12:30 to 1:30, this one almost blew my socks off. I added up my microboluses, and as I said, my sugar was rising. I got 0.65 units of a 1.25 basal rate, which meant about 50%. So for an hour, as my sugar was rising, I was getting about 50% of my actual basal rate, and it was because of my calibration factor rising and falling. So now I'm sitting on 40 minutes of no basal, an hour of a slightly decreased basal, an hour of a 50% decreased basal, and at 1:30, as I said, I was starting to hit the roof, and then it was just straight up from there. My numbers reached, by 3:19, I was at 270, and I was on the floor. I was freaking bummed. I mean, it's, when I went back and looked again, this is what I figured. My rise started at 1:30. Between 1 and 1:30, I received 0.15 units of insulin, which would be like, which was the equivalent of being on a 25% temp basal. I exercise at 50%. Like I didn't need it. And I think it's why auto mode doesn't work for me, is because it's making these really, really, really big choices. So I can tell you my next day, manual. And I've been in there since. I changed 2 infusion sets back-to-back days because I could not figure out what was happening with my blood sugar. And I knew something had to be wrong, and it turned out that it was just auto mode that was wrong. So I'm not trying to discourage people from being in auto mode. I'm just trying to help people understand that if you have some crazy looking blood sugars, it really might not be anything you're doing, or really if you're blaming yourself, I don't know. You need to maybe keep an eye out for minimum deliveries, but also those micro boluses where there's kind of in and out or whatever. Those are the equivalent, I believe, as a temp basal. And what does a temp basal do to your blood sugar? Because maybe it's like me, maybe it's it's got a profound effect. I'm going to bed. Have a good night, and thanks for watching.